economy and thinking about that from an environmental and socially sustainable perspective. And we have another fantastic panel who I'm going to introduce you to. First off, Diana from the class of 2017 and a DCU Global Business student. We've got Derval McDonald, who's the Group Business Editor at The Independent. And then we have Emma Swift, who's an alumni of the Washington Ireland programme and the Global Product Policy Lead at Google. Yes. Okay, she's saying not lead. I'm making her the leader for today. So yes, we're really keen, Diana, to hear from you, to hear about the process of shaping this paper around the future economy for the island of Ireland.
Yeah, so good morning everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So just like the cultural identity paper, our paper was the product of 10 very intelligent, bright young people coming from very diverse backgrounds. So we had very heated discussions, which then turned into constructive dialogues, and the product is this paper that you have in front of you today. So our vision for the Ireland 2040 economy is for a robust and resilient economy. We hope that it's going to be one that serves the values of our society, one that is focused on sustainable and responsible development, and also that creates a socially equitable society. So the main focus points which we based our discussions around were the global trends that are going to shape the next 20 years, also technological innovations, and the big problem of our generation, climate change. So underneath those three headings, we also came up with three ambitious goals, which we hope that they're going to be integrated in the economy by 2040. So the first goal is we hope that the Irish economic model is going to be rooted in the principles of a circular economy. Under those headings, we discussed about climate change, agriculture, business, and taxation. Goal number 2, we discussed about measuring and investing in economy in a way that serves our ambitions as a society, and also the way we view economy, the metrics that we use and the language we use to talk about our economy. And then goal number 3, finally, is to have the infrastructure to support people in both large cities and rural areas for generations to come. So here we dived in a bit into the first plan to a decentralised Ireland and what that could mean for an all-island economy. So with that, I think we should start a panel.
Brilliant, thank you. And Derval, are there others from, Diana, are there others from the team here today? Yeah. Give us a wave, guys. We'll be coming for you to get your views. I was really fascinated actually when I read just at the focus around this kind of technological advancement and thinking about future skills and what the future workforce will look like in Ireland and what kind of skills they'll need. And particularly one of the things that you called out was around kind of advances in artificial intelligence and jobs that we have today that we might not necessarily have tomorrow. Did you guys kind of discuss the idea of reskilling or getting new skills for that kind of future workforce based on what we understand the economy will be like in the future?
Yeah, so, I wish Zeki would have been here. He would have done great justice. So, we discussed tech opportunities in Ireland, and we focused on robotics and artificial intelligence because we see them as the future of this island. So we obviously mentioned a few threats such as automation of jobs or people losing them, but we focused on the opportunities that could come about, so investing more into STEM because we've got great possibilities around third level education, and also sort of supporting people into this mobility of labour to help them to reskill and find other jobs or upgrade in their current one.
And Derval, that was something I think you were looking to explore a little bit further around that mobility and actually migration, skills coming into Ireland as well as skills moving around. Can you talk to us?
First of all, I want to congratulate you on the paper. The paper was absolutely outstanding, and one which I'll be using for research. And the second is to congratulate you, which is rare in the business world to have an all-female panel. I've spent my entire professional career as the token chick, so it's absolutely brilliant to see an all-female panel. But the paper overall and the economy and the one on the economy in particular, and can people hear me? Looked at four main factors, as I saw them, that are shaping the future of the world and of the economy. It's markets and it's migration, and not migration in that sense of refugees migrating, even though one person every 3 seconds at present is being displaced. It also encompasses labour mobility, and the paper identified that as key to the future. The other aims, Moore's Law, so that notion that things are doubling every 2 years has been absolutely thrown out of the window when it comes to technology, so the pace and scale of digital disruption, and also Mother Nature, because apparently climate change is becoming a bad word. But those are kind of the key things that they identified. And as the world has become more globalised, we've now got digital globalisation. And the more interconnected the world has become, the more interdependent it has become. And that is going to create both challenges and opportunities. There's a lot of kind of faith placed in what politicians are going to have to do. I would argue that we're at a stage now where traditional political models are broken, if not seriously under challenge. And when I looked at it, one of the things I think, when you look at migration and mobility, that is going to be key, because one of the biggest strategic risks we face is that if governments don't have long-range strategies, we are going to have two phenomena. There's going to be mass unemployment and there's going to be underemployment. And we're actually sometimes still, even though we're looking to the future, discussing the future in current employment models. But in the future, there's going to be an awful lot more self-employment. Even though this government has committed not to have 0-hours contracts, what is the security of employment going to look like in the future? And I think that Brexit and the election of Donald Trump gave us an insight into what can happen when there's disaffection around issues such as underemployment, which can pose as significant challenges as non-employment. But that is one of the things that I think we really need to be mindful of it. And another thing that I think we're starting to see a big significant debate about is, will corporations outgrow or become more powerful than governments? And that is something I think that we're seeing it now, and a little bit of a debate about in terms of the role of Facebook and others in terms of affecting politics. One of the things that I thought may have been mentioned, because I think it really speaks to the bit about business values, is the role of women in the workforce and the increased representation of women in the workforce. I think if we're going to move towards more emotional intelligence in the workforce, more social values, we need seriously to increase that. But anybody who knows my work would know that that is something I'm always harping on about. And then there's just in respect of the all-island economy. I'm from Newry in County Down, or Armagh, depending on who's winning the championship. But my mommy's from Dundalk and my daddy's from Newry. And I grew up in the shadow, long gone, thankfully, of one of the largest British Army bases at Clog. And we travelled that road every single week. And we saw firsthand, as young kids, the impact of disruption on trade that came about from those borders. I didn't understand the phrase currency volatility, but I knew that one week we shopped in Dundalk and the next week we shopped in Banbridge, and that was just kind of the way that it worked. One of the best things about the Good Friday Agreement, and it anticipated many things. It was one of the best exercises in constitutional scenario planning we've ever had. But one of the things it did not anticipate was Britain leaving the European Union. And so now we're faced with a huge existential challenge. And my memories of that border are very acute still in my mind, and that knowledge of that one of the best things about the peace process in my time has been the invisible border and the increase of trade. And whilst there have been a lot of things that we can point to, tangible things that the Good Friday Agreement has brought, one of the best things has been the development, by stealth almost, of an all-island economy, whether it's in energy, whether it is in terms of water, other things. And we have to, your generation has to maintain that at all costs, whatever solution comes about. And another thing, when I was a teenager growing up in Newry, I did not think that peace was possible in my lifetime. By the time I left Trinity, the Good Friday Agreement had been signed, and it's extraordinary now that we're speaking even in very broad terms, and obviously the last bit spoke to identity, but even in terms of an all-island economy. I no longer think of a united Ireland, but I do think passionately about a united Ireland. And I think what the paper, one of its strongest things that it points to is that the future of this island is dependent on leveraging the economics north and south.
And Emma, I'm really keen to get your views, and actually, Derval, you picked up on it or mentioned it briefly there, around that dynamic between kind of government, policy makers, decision makers, and working with businesses, and how they manage that kind of dynamic and the power shift that you sort of see and experience in some of your roles. So current role, I know previously you worked at Tech City over in the UK, so just how you mediate that dynamic when you're thinking about the future progress of the economy. You obviously have to work with big business, but then also trying to respect the government's objectives and what they're seeking to achieve through the economy. How, like, can you just talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a lot raised already. So, yeah, I mean, first to kind of go to talk about the paper as well. I mean, I was really impressed because having been part of a WIP class, I know that it's incredibly difficult to get everybody's views together into some kind of concise, arrangement. So congratulations on that, because been there, and I don't think we got anywhere near to having some kind of agreement. I think, so going back to a couple of the points. So yeah, my previous kind of role was working with Tech City with the UK government, so supporting the growth of technology startups across the country. So we did a lot into regional development, worked a lot in tech policy as well. And I think a huge kind of focus, is education. And it's a huge kind of problem. And I think that there's some of the lessons that they've kind of that I think can be kind of taken up by Ireland, and I think we need to completely think differently about how we kind of educate for the growth of these industries. I'm actually very optimistic about the future of work. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom in terms of, gosh, it's going to have mass unemployment and everything else, but I think that there's been a huge shift over the last 200 years in industry, and even within the company I'm in now, there's constantly new roles kind of coming up, and about 60% of the roles in 20 years don't exist at the moment. My job didn't exist 10 years ago, so how we kind of prepare for that is very different. And when we did a huge kind of research project in the UK, working with kind of startups and companies about education, and one of the things we kind of asked them was, where do you kind of, like, what educational source do you source your talent from? And well over 50% of them said that they relied on future kind of employees who had self-taught themselves. And then the next kind of one after that there was kind of done online courses and that kind of stuff, or in-house training. And I think universities was done at like 23%. So I know there's this huge kind of move of like, we've got to get everybody coding and we've got to get all this kind of stuff, and I actually kind of disagree with that, because I think those kind of languages, those kind of they change so much. There's even a current problem with how we kind of teach computer science in certain universities, where we're teaching kind of languages that are 10 years old and not currently being used in industries today. It's actually more about focusing on skills of like critical thinking and problem solving, this kind of thing, and that doesn't. And as STEM is kind of really important, I'm kind of one of those advocates that's like, actually the arts are really important as well, and like both of those together are really critical, and you can see it with a lot of the tech companies as well. They're employing people from both those backgrounds, because it's great that you have the engineers and things, the technical side, but you actually need those people who have kind of gone through the humanities to help kind of work alongside them in terms of helping them make these things more user accessible, like, because a lot of this technology around AI and machine learning, it's been around for ages, it's been around for quite a while. It's just the fact that we just didn't really make it user friendly or accessible, and
I think that's why STEM has become STEAM, that you put the arts right in the middle of it. I think in the future we are going to be less worrying about your credentials. When it comes to education, it'll be less about credentials like, I have a law degree or I have a such and such degree. It is all actually going to be about the skill set, and we're going to have an economic infrastructure and an education infrastructure that allows for constant upskilling and learning, and that is going to totally change the way we even view it, because even at present we're probably producing too many people at third level, and as a champion for the arts, I actually think that art and music and that kind of thinking is going to become really important as machines and humans kind of kind of interact and synergize.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things which came across really strongly to me was this sustainable economy and thinking about the environment, thinking about the impact, thinking about climate change, and particularly you called out some pretty strong views around future of the agriculture industry for Ireland. I was keen to just kind of hear your kind of summary of that and maybe any responses you guys might have around that too.
Yeah, so it was actually quite interesting because when we all sat down the first time to sort of start brainstorming around the paper, I think the majority of us said that, you know, there has to be sustainable development and environmental safety somewhere in it. And then most of the topics started going underneath that umbrella, and then when we reached the topic of agriculture, we discussed, you know, food systems and, you know, the autonomy of the farmer and the way we would like to connect communities with farmers. So, for example, while in Washington, something that fascinated me was every Saturday in Silver Spring, the area where I was living, they would gather the farmers from all nearby, and they would have farmers markets. So that's where most families would shop around, something which in Ireland is not really a common practice, despite the fact that we have such a strong agriculture sector. So those discussions were had around these sort of like connecting and gathering the farmers and the communities.
I've just come back from the ploughing championships
Yes, tell us more.
where I was nearly dragged off stage during a debate about prenuptial agreements on farms, but it's complicated. It's not all about road frontage anymore, but it's actually, just as an aside, it's really ironic. When the divorce referendum first came through in Ireland and it was passed by barely 1%, the farmers were utterly, absolutely against divorce. Mostly actually because of land, and now they're the champions of prenuptial agreements to protect their land, but it's just an interesting social thing. But this one's complicated. I struggled, I have to say, with a little bit of this, because in Ireland the importance and the dominance in particular of the meat and dairy sectors and the conflict between food security and sovereignty on one hand and sustainability on the other. When you see Ireland hoping to become the next New Zealand in terms of dairy production, when you see the forthcoming trade agreement that's going to be negotiated between the EU and Australia, look, one of the big issues is going to be around farming and tariffs. Our own population, as the Taoiseach said earlier, is going to be inching back up towards pre-famine levels, and we're already in difficulty in terms of our emissions. So there is going to be a big fight between that, and good luck trying to take common agricultural policy things away from that. That is going to, it's one of the most powerful lobby groups in this country, and it's one of the most important sectors. But I see, looking beyond Ireland, that is actually going to be one of the biggest conflicts. And equally, when you look actually at the future of work, if you look to the US, for example, on how important farming and food production is there, but actually look at the amount of people who are working in it to sustain it. So technology is going to have a huge part in that. And so I think there's going to be a conflict between, it's going to be a little bit like Make Me Chaste, but not just yet. Everybody's going to want sustainability, but actually achieving that as our own economy grows, and especially as we target exports outside, particularly around Asia, and now China. China wants our milk. So can you imagine our emissions if we successfully crack that market? Tricky.
And that kind of balance, isn't it? I think of the sustainability and the aspiration, but also the kind of export and the opportunity for the island of Ireland is definitely one we have to mediate as well.
I think, and I was thinking some point as well about kind of consumer demand around this as well, because, if you look at kind of, a lot of environmental groups and, the big push is to kind of not eat as much meat, kind of like not just be kind of, consider we consume too much, and this is what's kind of driving this kind of overproduction and everything else within agriculture. I mean, I heard on the radio there 3 days ago that the Irish farmers are concerned that people don't want to drink cow's milk anymore. They're drinking more like almond and soy, and they've launched, I don't know if anyone's heard this, they've launched a fizzy a milk drink to make it, this is legit, a fizzy milk drink to make it more attractive to teenagers, so you'll get like a strawberry fizzy milk, but like that's kind of, I think that consumer demand is also, I think, an important thing, an important kind of part of this.
And one of the things the paper tries to stress is, can you actually decouple consumer growth or consumer kind of demand, and that is going to be very, 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 very difficult. But I tell you what, if the whip can do what no other government has done and crack the farmers' lobby. Well done.
Maybe just one more question around the infrastructure piece and the kind of regional development. We're just keen for you to talk a little bit more about what that looks like from the kind of group's discussion and perspective in terms of roads and connecting other locations, particularly with economic growth, population growth, more opportunities outside of Dublin. Tell me a little bit more about your aspiration there around infrastructure for regional development.
Right, so our vision was that Dublin is going to continue on this trajectory of growth and flourish in all aspects of the economy, but at the same time, other major cities around Ireland, such as Limerick, Cork, they should have the same opportunity to grow. So as Leo Varadkar has mentioned earlier on, strategic investment in road networks, railway transport is well needed in order to sort of decongest and take away the heat from Dublin, because even he said everything goes through Dublin, and I was glad to hear that new motorway is opening today. So we were saying that by reallocating and redistributing resources and people, you're going to offer this opportunity towards those cities to grow, such as Dublin, but at the same time also sustain relationships with Dublin and Belfast was something that we noted.
Yeah, you called that out specifically. And I don't know whether you want to speak a little bit more around that regional development piece.
No,
Emma.
totally. And I mean, when I was in the UK, we had the same kind of issues of London dominates and the rest of the country doesn't care, and I think it's very similar in a lot of different kind of countries. I think some of the points that you guys highlighted are really important. I think the infrastructure side is just critical and is actually, I think, what the role of government should be. And there's a huge opportunity in Ireland for that. I don't know if anybody has seen the map comparing the railway network in the 1920s versus now. It's shocking. It's so I think there's and my mom's family's from Tyrone, and they always more on the loss of the railway. They came to 6 Mile Cross. It's okay. But I do think there's there's some of the infrastructure is in place, and it's we're not having to kind of buy up land or whatever else to kind of build that. I do. They mentioned it very briefly, the railways this morning, and I'm like, no, bring back the railways. But aside from the connectivity and everything else, it's critical. But I think I would, unsurprisingly, I think broadband's hugely important as well, because I think with the growth of technology, the fantastic thing about it is that all of your workers don't need to be in the same place, and you can kind of have offices in different towns across kind of in Ireland, and we've seen kind of companies who would in the UK that would have an office in Belfast with some of their kind of engineers, and then their sales office in London, and that is an example. I think as well, which wasn't mentioned, but I think is a huge opportunity for Ireland as well, and also always controversial, is in terms of property. There's so much available space in this country, and that can be utilised. And some examples that I've seen in my previous role, in Edinburgh, the government handed over. It's an old civil service building, civil service building, one of those 1970s monstrosities, that they handed over to just for startups, and it now holds one of the largest startup incubators in the UK. 70 startups are growing, and there's a few other examples of spaces being loaned out to community groups, to kind of the companies, and I think that Ireland has that. There are kind of those spaces that can be utilised, which will kind of encourage growth and enable kind of early stage businesses to grow in those places.
I like the Taoiseach. I'm not a cynic, but after 15 years in journalism, I'm a sceptic, and most of you in this room are not old enough to remember the last time we experimented with decentralisation. It didn't go as well as planned, but it's really, really needed, because relative to any other European city, we have far too much GDP concentrated in Dublin. Far too much. Even relative to London, to Paris, to other places, and that is a real problem. And I think infrastructure happens at several levels. There's physical infrastructure in terms of roads, access networks, but there's also that around broadband and connectivity. The future of work will see people working far more remotely, and it's that persistent, constant investment, because even though we were very, very stuck during the years of the crisis, in a sense we wasted it with a lack of advanced planning, because it's the Lewis lines are being connected, but they're only being connected now. A lot of stuff could have been done much easier. And even like, I spend a lot of my time now as business editor talking, writing everything about Brexit, and like everyone, like many people, I'm not too happy about it. But at the same time, I think there are still great opportunities for an all-island synergies, because if the Britain does leave the European Union, we're going to have a sterling economy, and a Europe or a EU economy, and I think that we are going to be able to leverage that. One thing I did want to just pick up on just before we leave is on the issue of taxation, which is very relevant. If anybody listened to in French to Macron's 100-minute speech yesterday, where he championed the harmonisation of tax, and there are very few red lines that Ireland has in respect of its membership of the European Union, but that is one of them. And it's to that extent, again, how strong are our political and other institutions to withstand the kind of things that matter to us. Look at Belfast this morning, overnight, the decision in respect of Bombardier. We are still an all-island economy that is very, very vulnerable to twists in both international and domestic things. So those are the kind of things we need to be constantly nimble in respect of that. And I'm an absolute devout European, but I anticipate in a couple of years' time that, depending on the hegemony of Germany and France and where they in particular want to go, will that place strains on our own relationship in respect of the kind of economic policies that we're going to need for the entire of the island to kind of maintain and protect our own economy. So.
And thank you, Derval. I wondered, do we have time for a few questions? Yeah, I'm going to say, is that okay? Yeah, perfect, great, go for it. Introduce yourself.
I've been here for around 15 minutes. But, my name's Robert, I'm part of the class of 2017. I just wanted to come back a bit. Obviously the task was to look at an all-island economy, and Derval, you mentioned that you no longer believe in a united Ireland, but in a united Ireland. I kind of wondering if we could just kind of flesh that out a bit more in terms of, it seems to me, and certainly a lot of conversations, and I think, I don't want to misquote the Taoiseach, but I think he did say in the past that United Ireland is inevitable at some point. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. Thank God he's left. But I mean, it's just interesting, it seems to me that in terms of looking at this all-island economy, it does make sense that if we are going to be an all-island economy, that we actually are one nation, one kind of political entity. So I just wonder if you could flesh that out a bit more in terms of this idea of an all-island economy versus a united Ireland and what that difference would be.
Yeah, so I grew up in Newry. I'm a Catholic by birth, a constitutional nationalist, I suppose, broadly overall, but really interested in the debate earlier because I'm an Irish passport holder, but I am absolutely off the wall from Northern Ireland, and if you really push me, I'm a Newry Bosco girl. But, you know, so I'm really, really interested in this. And I suppose you grew up with, you know, an expectation that at some point down the line there might be a united Ireland. And I suppose growing up as a constitutional nationalist, that maybe would have been something that I would have perhaps dreamt of or thought of. But now it is, having seen the price that the Troubles wrought on our communities, and over 90% of our young people in Northern Ireland are still being educated in segregated schools, which is shocking after almost 20 years. As somebody who grew up in the north with lots of safe spaces, I play violin. The only way you could get to keep your violin was if you went to the orchestra every Saturday, and that was one of the places where we got to meet people from other faiths. And so now I suppose that I'm older, what matters to me more is that the island is united. And to allow whatever constitutional process takes its place. I don't advocate the 50% plus one, because a united Ireland that comes about as a result where it triggers violence from, or triggers and especially when you look at young unionists and young loyalists who are arguably more affected. And you have to remember that the North was in economic terms even more affected by the financial crisis arguably than down here in many respects. And you look at the interconnectedness. My twin sister is one of these people who crosses the border every single day. She lives in Newry, she works in Dublin. So for me, if the price of a united Ireland in that sort of constitutional sense is more violence, it is not worth it. Because I don't think any of us could go back to the kind of childhood that we had. So that's why I'm more interested in a united Ireland. And if that means, we put a lot of structures in place after the Good Friday Agreement around our waterways, around energy, and if we can find common ground, maybe it is, as Edward Carson says, maybe we can woo the other side, or maybe we can find another sort of a destiny. But if we get stuck into really, really divisive identity politics, we'll never proceed. So I actually think that is the way, and I think that business can really, really lead the way in that respect. And let's not just panic about that provision in the Good Friday Agreement that allows for a border poll. Let's not trigger it unnecessarily. And let's kind of keep working towards the United Ireland and see what follows out of that. So no, it isn't a technical answer to your question, but for me, that is now what I want, a United Ireland, because without peace, you can't have prosperity.
And we've just time for one more question, I think. Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
Can I do it because I've had my hand up?
Oh, sorry, yeah, go for it. Yeah, sorry, yeah, go for it.
From the floor, they're totally echo. I'm a one woman, and you're a woman. I'm sorry, but championship down or on that.
I tried married a man, it's all right.
But I was an intern in 1998. I actually told Leo Bradcar about the WIP, and so I was very proud this morning to listen to that. And one of the things, the experiences I wanted to bring is I was a wifey woman involved in politics in Queens, and then got a job down south working in politics down here, and that's where I started my career. And then I ended up in the not-for-profit sector. But women's voices in these leadership roles within politics is really important, and we're still, it's almost 18 years later, and it's still the same, you know. And I just encourage the young women in the room today to just tone down that cynic that Leo talked about earlier, and up the ante, because I think it's really important in terms of the whole discussion around business in particular. I work in cancer research now. I'm the CEO of a not-for-profit group and manage a whole bunch of cancer researchers and clinicians who work on cures for cancer. We're looking at big data, and lovely to hear somebody who's worked with Biden, and we might hear something about Moonshot later on. But that's an area that I think there's huge development for cross-border work, and that's something that I'm trying to drive now with Intertrade Ireland, and look at how our researchers on both sides of the border can start to work together. This was a commitment to the Good Friday Agreement. Cancer was one of those items. You talked about, let's pick areas that we can really work together on. Who doesn't want to fight cancer? And you know, we're in a position where we've got the most amazing researchers, and Brexit actually offers an opportunity for that. We don't know what's going to play out in terms of the European funding for UK clinicians and investigators. So this idea of satellite labs in this part of the world, where you know a lot of the research for these eminent people. I mean, there's also SFI are already hunting down Brexit professors. I don't know if you know that, and bringing them into the Republic of Ireland. But there's a real in it. But I would say don't underplay what you're talking about in terms of past. I'm going to do a shameless plug. My brother's just written a book, Bombs, Bullets and the Border, and he's another alumni from 1999. And you know, one of the things, because it was published this year, of course, it's been very got a lot of attention. One of the things he talks about is when you have a border, irrespective of whether it's physical or not, it has an effect on the psyche of the people around it. And me growing up on the border, I certainly have that experience. And I think it's important not to, you know, we have to keep driving this conversation we're talking about is really important in terms of working together, looking for ways to work together. A constitutional United Ireland is probably not the way forward, but this is going to be complicated. And I just, you know, I think the thinking here is really good, but don't underestimate the impact of a border of any kind.
Thank you. No, thank you, Sharon. And yeah, thank you to our panel. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. And to the guys on the paper, very well done again. It's not an easy one to bring all of this together into something you can all put on paper. And as I said before, you know, it's about a dialogue and compromise, and you guys actually continuing these conversations and adding your voice. Male and female voices are welcome on the issues at stake here. And to Derval and Emma, thank you so much for joining the panel this morning. We're just going to take a short break now, I think until like 12 o'clock, and then we're going to hear from the third panel and then from Jake Sullivan. So yep, thank you one and all, that was great.